The night I left home wasn't dramatic. There were no broken dishes, no slammed doors, and no heartfelt goodbyes. Just my father's voice echoing through the hallway. If you're so smart, Ethan, then go build your own life. Don't expect another penny from me. I stood frozen for a moment, my backpack hanging from one shoulder. My mother looked down at the kitchen, floor unable to meet my eyes. She had spent years avoiding arguments by pretending they didn't exist. My younger sister Lily stood halfway down the stairs silently crying. Dad folded his arms across his chest. Well, what are you waiting for? I nodded once. Okay. That single word surprised him. He expected me to argue. He expected me to apologize. Instead, I walked upstairs, packed a few clothes, my laptop, and the notebook where I had written every business idea I'd ever had. 20 minutes later, I walked out the front door. Nobody stopped me. The first few weeks were brutal. I rented the smallest room I could find above an old convenience shop. The room had peeling paint, a broken heater, and a window that wouldn't shut properly. At night, I could hear traffic until sunrise. My savings barely covered rent. During the day, I worked at a warehouse loading delivery vans. At night, I built websites for local businesses. Sleep became a luxury. Coffee became dinner. Some nights, I wondered if Dad had been right. Maybe I was arrogant. Maybe I had dreamed too big. But every time those thoughts appeared, I remembered the look on his face. He didn't want me to succeed. He wanted me to come back and admit he had been right all along. That became my motivation. Growing up, Dad controlled everything. He chose where we went. He decided what we ate. He even told us which careers were acceptable. According to him, success meant getting a stable job, staying quiet, and never taking risks. Dreams were for fools. I wanted something different. Ever since I was 16, I'd been fascinated by technology. I taught myself coding using free online videos. While my friends played video games, I spent nights learning how businesses grew online. Dad called it a waste of time. Real men work with their hands, he'd say. You'll never make money staring at a computer. I stopped trying to convince him. 3 months after moving out, something unexpected happened. One of my website clients referred me to another company, then another. Soon I had more work than I could handle alone. For the first time in my life, I turned down overtime at the warehouse because my freelance income had become higher. The decision terrified me. Leaving a guaranteed paycheck felt reckless. But if I wanted a different future, I had to take the risk. So I quit. The warehouse manager shook my hand. I think you'll do well, Ethan. Those words meant more than he realized. Nobody in my family had ever said they believed in me. Life slowly improved. I bought a second-hand desk, then a better laptop. A few months later, I moved into a small apartment with actual heating. It wasn't luxurious, but every piece of furniture inside belonged to me. Every bill carried my name. Every achievement had been earned. One evening while cooking instant noodles, my phone buzzed. Lily. I hadn't spoken to anyone from home in nearly 6 months. I answered immediately. Hey. She sounded nervous. Dad still talks about you? I laughed quietly. I'm guessing not in a good way. No. She hesitated. He tells everyone you failed. What in? He says you couldn't survive without him. I looked around my apartment. The rent was paid. Clients were waiting for my emails. Work filled my calendar for the next 2 months. I certainly hadn't failed. Why would he say that? Because nobody knows you left by choice. What do you mean? He tells relatives he kicked you out because you were lazy. Those words hit harder than I expected. Lazy. I'd worked nearly every single day since leaving, sometimes 16 hours straight. But I realized something important. People often rewrite history when the truth makes them uncomfortable. A week later, I received an email from a company much larger than any client I'd ever worked with. They wanted a meeting. I almost deleted it thinking it was spam. Thankfully, I didn't. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. By the end, they offered me a 12-month contract worth more money than I'd earned in my entire life. When I walked out of the building, I sat on a nearby bench in complete silence. For years, I'd waited for someone to believe in my abilities. Now a company full of strangers believed in me more than my own father ever had. That night, I didn't celebrate. I simply opened my notebook. On the first page was something I'd written years earlier. One day, I'll build a life where nobody can decide my worth except me. I smiled. For the first time, it no longer felt like a dream. The contract changed everything. Within a year, I had hired 3 employees, rented a small office, and built a digital agency that worked with businesses across the country. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just paying my own bills. I was creating jobs for other people. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same father who once laughed at me for staring at a computer had unknowingly pushed me toward the life I always wanted. I rarely thought about home anymore. Not because I had forgotten, because I had finally found peace. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon my phone rang. Dad. His name flashed across the screen. For several seconds I simply stared at it. Eventually I answered. Hello. His voice sounded different. Smaller. Ethan, I need to talk. There was no anger. No shouting. Only hesitation. What is it? The electricity's been cut off. I frowned. Okay. They say the bills haven't been paid. I didn't know what he expected me to say. Finally he sighed. I thought you handled all that before you left. I almost laughed. For years while living at home, I had quietly managed every online payment because Dad hated technology. I had set up automatic payments, renewed service contracts, and organized every household account. The day I moved out, I transferred everything back into his name and emailed him every password, account number, and instruction he would need. Apparently, he had never bothered to read any of it. I sent you everything, I replied calmly. I don't understand those emails. You never asked. Silence. Then he muttered, Can you just come fix it? I looked around my office. Employees were working, phones were ringing. Clients trusted me with their businesses. The young man who once rushed home whenever his father demanded something no longer existed. I'm afraid I can't. Another long silence. You'd really leave your own family like this? His words stung, not because they were true, because they ignored history. I didn't leave the family, Dad. You told me to build my own life. So I did. He had no answer. The call ended. A few days later, Lily visited my office. She walked in, looked around, and smiled. I can't believe you built all this. Neither could I. She hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words nearly broke me. They were everything I had wanted to hear growing up. Over coffee, she explained what had happened at home. Dad had spent months pretending everything was under control, but bills piled up. Maintenance was ignored. Debt kept growing. Instead of admitting he needed help, he blamed everyone else, especially me. He still tells relatives this is somehow your fault, Lily said. I smiled sadly. People can believe whatever they want, but it isn't fair. No, it isn't. Several weeks later, our extended family gathered for my grandmother's birthday. I hadn't planned to attend, but Grandma personally called me. I'd really like all my grandchildren together. For her, I couldn't say no. The moment I walked into the hall, conversation stopped. Some relatives looked surprised, others looked embarrassed. Then Dad appeared. He forced a smile. Well, look who finally showed up. I simply nodded. Grandma hugged me before anyone else could speak. I've missed you. So have I? Dinner was awkward. Eventually, one uncle asked the question everyone seemed to be thinking. So Ethan, how's life? Before I could answer, Dad interrupted. He's still figuring things out. Lily nearly dropped her fork. I calmly took a sip of water. Actually, my company just signed its biggest contract. The table became quiet. What company? Another cousin asked. I showed them a few photos on my phone. The office, my team, some recent projects. One cousin looked genuinely impressed. You own this? I do. Dad stared at the table. For years he had controlled the family narrative. Now the truth spoke for itself. Nobody argued. Nobody defended him. They simply looked at him with confusion. One aunt finally asked, I thought you said Ethan couldn't keep a job. Dad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. After dinner, he found me standing outside. The evening air was cool. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed. I didn't think you'd actually make it. I know. I thought you'd come back. I almost did. His eyes widened. What stopped you? I smiled gently. I realized I wasn't trying to prove you wrong. I was trying to prove to myself that I could build a better life. For the first time in years. He looked tired instead of angry. I made mistakes. Yes, I thought being strict would make you stronger. It did. But not in the way you expected. Another long silence. I'm sorry. The words were quiet. Almost unfamiliar. I had imagined hearing those words hundreds of times. Yet now that they had finally arrived, they didn't erase the past. But they did lighten it. I accept your apology, I said. But rebuilding trust takes time. He nodded. I understand. Months passed. Our relationship never returned to what it once was. In many ways, that was for the best. Instead, we slowly built something healthier, based on honesty, not fear. Dad eventually learned to ask for help instead of demanding it. And I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let yesterday control tomorrow. One afternoon, I stood in my office watching a new intern set up his desk. He reminded me of myself years earlier. Nervous, hopeful, unsure whether he belonged. I walked over and smiled. "You'll do great here." His shoulders relaxed immediately. As I walked away, I realized something. Encouragement costs nothing, but it can change someone's entire future. My father gave me doubt. Life gave me challenges. Success gave me confidence. But compassion? That was the one thing I chose to give myself. And in the end, that became the greatest victory of all.